right, guys, here we go. This is the easy one, the easiest form that we can do. Let's see if we are recording, and I hope we are. I guess it says you were scaring. Yeah, I see the record button. Good. So thank you, Ted. We'll get it all done that way. This is kind of the easiest one that you guys get, but it can trip you up if you're not careful with the way that you do a counter offer. As you know, basically you're going to get a purchase agreement. And that purchase agreement is going to be, what they want to pay for the property. It could be anything from deadlines that may be in the purchase agreement. And sometimes when you're talking to your seller, they're going, oh, no, we can't do this. We need this kind of money back on it, and so forth like that. And right now, with the advent of a lot of the lack of listings that we have, your counter offer can be a big part, because sometimes you might be able to negotiate, some better terms, and particularly if you're on the seller side and they like a price, for example, and it didn't get caught up in all the escalations and so forth like that. But it's quite possible that they may even want to have an occupancy agreement. There's some other tools that you can use. Basically, when somebody comes back and says, hey, we want to offer you, full price offer on this thing. And they may even say, I want to ask over, but you still may need a counter, because you might say, the closing date isn't right for us. We'd like to have an occupancy agreement. There's a lot of times that you can use this to your advantage, but too many times I see counter offers that haven't been filled out completely. And the next thing you know, I'm talking to another QB about what the intention was versus what was on paper. And as you guys know, I'm a big one to make sure you guys are always using the right forms to eliminate the intention, but to actually say, this is what we're requesting. So without any kind of further ado, you can see this is a counter offer. We're going to pretend that we're the seller on this deal. And so you've got an offer on the table. And I'm just going to keep it as a residential. As you guys know, I have the annotated copy. So if you want a copy, you can always just email me. And keep in mind, all annotated copies, they're not 100%, because every deal is unique. In this case, this person is a residential. The agreement, they sent it on the 21st, hypothetically. And John Smith is the buyer, and Mary Jones is the seller. So John Smith is sending it over. No, take it back. Let's try that again. Mary Jones is sending it over because, the buyer shot her an offer and she said, well, we're going to counter it. There's the street address, 123 Main Street here in Santa Fe. Always put in as much information as you can, though you can see there has legal description and meets of bounds. And at this point, I put not applicable or not available, because you really don't have a survey, but we're going to find it out. But we do know it's in Santa Fe County, okay? And this one here, people do get this one a little mixed up on occasion, because it'll say stuff right here. It'll say incorporated counter offers that are not expressly referenced below are not incorporated in the purchase agreement. What does that mean? Anybody want to take a shot at that? Nobody does? Okay, let me help you. So if this was counter number 3, hypothetically, it is possible that all you're changing each time, it might just be the purchase price. And they're very happy with the inspection to 15 days before the closing date. And they might even agree on the closing officer, right? But you guys can't agree on the purchase price. So counter offer 1 is saying, hey, $650. Counter offer 2 comes back and says, you know what, we want it $645, but we're okay with the other 3 items there. So you could put counter offer 1, okay, and you can keep going all the way until you finally get to maybe 4 or 5 offers down the way. Then you say counter offer 1 is still incorporated because you're agreeing with that, and boom. But where it gets gnarly sometimes is that if the things are changing all the time, you have to pay attention to say, hey, I'm agreeing with counteroffer 1 and 2, and maybe even 3, but all I did was give you counteroffer 4. So all those changes are incorporated in it. All right. So just be careful. So just on this particular counteroffer, number 1, I said the purchase price is going to be $650. We want the seller to have the septic inspected and repaired if needed no later than 15 days prior closing. And it can be anything, guys. But in this case, I know that septics are kind of tough to get a hold of, and you really want to make sure that it's going to transfer over, that the seller really indeed is going to say, yeah, I'm going to take care of all that issue. I moved the closing date to June 2nd. Maybe the purchase agreement said, April 3rd, who knows? And last but not least, I'm going to say that the title and closing to be Fidelity National Title. End of story. What does that mean? Well, still by law, buyer has the right to select the closing officer. But a lot of times, people say, hey, man, I've been working with Prima Title. They've opened it up, blah, blah, blah. And, this is the person that I want to work with. You might have a personal issue with that. I've been in business this many years. There are some closing officers I prefer not working with. So I might even go to the point of saying, no, you know what? I hear what you're saying on your listing agreement, blah, blah, blah. I neglected to say it the first time around on the offer, but I do want to change my closing officer. Is that a deal breaker? Hopefully not. And hopefully you've got enough faith with the closing officer to really utilize the best one that is. But do know that the buyer has the right to select the closing officer. Okay. And we move on down here.
Mr. Trujillo, I have a question.
Yes.
So in regards to changing the title officer, like you mentioned, is it really something that the brokers can negotiate? I thought it was between the buyer and the seller.
It is between the buyer and the seller. But often the buyer will come to you and say, what do you know about this person? They may come back to you, and it's that careful. You're on thin ice there. You're right. Because at that point, you are helping make a decision that perhaps does not belong to you. So, just keep that in mind. Okay. When you go here to the counter offer, you can see on the second page, if you don't have stuff that goes into the second one, always write in there, this page is intentionally blank. I do. It's just good practice. That way it looks like, okay, they looked at this and they didn't do that. We go to the next one here. Unchanged terms remain the same. All the other terms and conditions of the purchase agreement, not otherwise modified in this counter offer, remain unchanged. I want you to be very careful with dates these days, because a lot of times we are using hard dates. And right now, with as many officer on the table, being a backup offer, you've got to look at those dates and saying, well, if I'm a backup offer and I said that this has to be done on the 24th, and I am not even considered the primary until April 15th, well, then you're writing a bunch of amendments to clean up the calendar. So in this case, I want you guys to think about that a lot. We'll do a calendar class pretty quick. But when you're writing your purchase agreement, start looking at, 10 days from closing, 10 days from acceptance, 3 days from acceptance. Use those terms instead of putting a hard term date on there, because you may land up being a second backup offer. And if you put a hard date in it, then you're writing amendments. I mean, it can be done, but I'm just trying to make your life a little easier, that you're not constantly writing and go, oh my God, why didn't I did that in the first place? Okay. So in this case, I said the expiration of the counter will expire unless acceptance is delivered in writing to, in this case, to the seller's broker on April 24th, 4 o'clock. What's an acceptable time? Well, my personal belief, I'm not going to give more than 24 hours. They can at least come back and say, hey, Tom, I can't get it to you until 5 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. I could probably live with that. But the truth be said, one of the reasons that I never put 5 o'clock is I like to be at home at 5 o'clock if I can. And so I try to put a 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock deadline, because that's also me calling up that other broker and saying, hey man, we got this counter out there. What's the deal? How come you didn't get it to me? Well, that my people are out of town. All right. Well, it would have been helpful for you to tell me this because I've seen deals fall apart when there are in this market, in this climate of a market, other things brewing. Okay. And what I mean by that is let's say that I'm the seller's broker here. I've got this for 650,000 or 645. We just shot back a counter to Cynthia for 650. And now I'm waiting on her. In the meantime, because this is out there, Suzanne calls me up and says, man, I've got a buyer and he's willing to go 670. Whoa. That gives me enough time to say, I'm going to rescind my counter offer to Cynthia if I want to. So I don't want to give it a lot of slack, in particular in this time of this weather. I mean, real estate temperature that we're dealing with. I will tell you guys that I'm a big believer that if you are communicating, if you're on that phone and you're talking to that other broker, you're going to create that relationship. And where I find that deals fall apart is when brokers aren't talking to each other. I mean, this one that I got to do here at 2:00 this afternoon is because, frankly, I don't think my broker was talking to their broker and their broker wasn't talking to our broker. And now we got a big mess to clean up. So, take it upon yourself to really be talking to that other broker, but talk to them in a professional manner, just not BS, but saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking. All right, I don't want to spend too much time here. And the reality of all of it is when you get through it all, you can see right here, if rejecting or making a subsequent counterparty receiving the counter should not sign. So if this is sent to me from my seller and we're doing a counter or vice versa, I'm just going to either reject and submit with a new counter offer 2, and I'm going to have them initial it, but I will not sign it. Okay. Same thing. If they reject this counter offer, boom, somebody's out in the woodpile. And all of a sudden, our time lapse or it's going to lapse and we feel comfortable, boom, initial, but do not sign. Once you sign, you have created yourself a contract. Okay. Any questions on the counter? That's a pretty easy one.
I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so if your client rejects it and they don't want to respond in any way, if they don't check off that reject where it says rejects this counter offer and the 4:00 expires, what happens then?
Well, you have a void contract. Okay. Basically, what does that mean? Well, be careful with that, Robert, because people, even if they don't sign it, or if they don't follow the timeline, you could all of a sudden get an offer at 10:00 at night. Says, yeah, we agree with it now. Whoa, wow, okay. Well, now you're sitting there trying to prove the fact that they missed the deadline. They did indeed miss the deadline, but why not take care of that business beforehand and reject it within the timeline? Because you do just have a voidable contract and it can be argued in court. And that's what happens. And then the next thing you know is your QB is talking to the other QB. Well, their intention was that they were going to accept it, but they didn't get around, or they rejected and they didn't get around to doing it. Well, then the buyer said, yeah, well, I signed off on it. I signed off 3 minutes after the hour. Well, my watch says 4:00 and your watch says 4:03. I mean, that's the point of all these little check marks and ways to get out of a deal and the rejection, so forth, that NMAR has put out there. And it's really falls on us as professionals to use these forms in the manner that they were designed. Don't bring down the house on you if you don't have to. Okay. Okay, this is the fun one. And this is a contingency. Contingencies are tricky. They're a good tool. In a market like we have right now, if I was on the listing side and it's so hot, there's a very good chance that I would not even look at a contingency. Why would I? When I know that hypothetically, Cynthia says, hey, I can buy your house pending me able to sell my house somewhere else. In the meantime, it's only been on the market 3 days and everybody's going crazy. All right, let's change the market a little bit. Now you have this property on the market. It's been on for 60, 80 days. Nothing's happened. Cynthia comes forward and says, boy, we're going to sell our house up in Colorado. Okay, well, would you consider taking a full boat offer based on the fact that we're going to sell our house? There's some viability with that. It's better if Cynthia's house is already under contract and she has a closing date. That would make me a little bit happier. And I might consider it because she's going to give me full boat versus me waiting around for somebody to make me an offer. And if you're the person who is going to be writing the buyer sales contingency along with the purchase agreement, you really want to sweeten the pie as much as you can to the seller because houses are hard to get. So the intended use, and I know I highlighted all of it, the form is intended to be used under the following circumstances. The buyer is making an offer on the seller's property, and the buyer is attempting to sell his or her existing property, and the buyer is making his offer to purchase the seller's property subject to the sale, closing, and funding of this property, and the seller agrees to discontinue MLS marketing of this property once the buyer's property goes under contract. We talk a lot about backup offers these days. I think that doing a contingency is just as good as a backup offer. In some respects, may be better because there is a property that is being used to facilitate this contract. All right. As used in this agreement to describe the contingency, the term satisfies and any variation thereof means that the buyer's property has closed and funded, and the term waives and any variation thereof means that it is no longer necessary for the buyer to sell his property in order to purchase the seller's property. So all of a sudden, got rich Uncle Bill kicks the bucket and he says, you know what? Here's cash. You get an inheritance and you go, wow, I can waive this contingency because all of a sudden I just came in at a bunch of money. I don't even have to sell my property. So that's another way that you can utilize this as it's been waived. In other words, if the buyer waives a contingency, the buyer no longer making the purchase of the seller's property is contingent on the buyer selling his. So there's the word there, waives and satisfy. So the following agreement, I'm again just going through dates. I said April 20th between John Smith and Mary Smith or whoever, the name of the buyer and the name of the seller on 123 Main Street in Santa Fe. That's the property they have already made the purchase agreement for. This is the property you want to buy. However, we are only able to buy this property with a contingency. So the purchase agreement is subject to the sale, closing and funding of the buyer's property located in San Diego, California. So they're back there with their property that either they're going to put on the market or is already on the market. So the question becomes, if you're the seller, well, maybe can I take this offer? Well, if I take this offer, do I have to take it off the market? No, because that's the marketing period. So the seller has the right to offer the subject for sale and to consider additional offers until the buyer delivers a written notice that the buyer has entered a contract for the sale of the property. So in other words, if I'm the seller and I'm willing to take this risk of it's very minimal risk as far as I'm concerned in this market, I'll say, yeah, I'll take this contingency offer if you sell in yours. You made me a sweet offer. However, I'm going to still I'm still leaving it on the market. It's still an active listing until you tell me, guess what? I got the money in the hand. We closed the deal. All right. So that's considered the marketing period. Buyer may notify the seller, okay, by email in this case, that the buyer has entered a contract for the sales of the property. So at that point, what happens? The deadline. In the event the seller receives another acceptable offer to purchase the subject property, which is in the marketing period, the seller shall deliver written notification to the buyer that the contingency must be satisfied or waived within 24 hours. That's my date, my time there. What does that mean? So all of a sudden, Suzanne says, oh, Cynthia's over here. She says, hey, great, man. We're going to buy your house once we sell our house in San Diego. Suzanne comes along. She's got a great client, a whole bit. And she says, you know what? We're ready to go now. We're ready to write that check and go to closing. Well, since I have this, I have to tell Suzanne, I can't yet because I have a contingency. I've got to send back to Cynthia, hey, Cynthia, can you perform, man? You've got 24 hours to tell me if you can perform. If you can't, bye-bye. I've got somebody else in line. All right. So hypothetically, Cynthia says, yeah, I can perform. No problem. My rich uncle died and he left me a bunch of money. So, man, I'm going to get the form to you and I'm going to waive this contingency because I've got the money and all the other deadlines are going to fall in place once I get that letter. Okay. Here's a good line, though, that we sometimes get tripped up. If the contingency deadline falls on a weekend or a legal holiday, the contingency deadline shall not be extended to the next business day. We get caught up with that all the time. Actual days versus business days. And in terms of the contingency for the buyer here, it does not exceed. So that means if it happens to hit on a Friday, Cynthia better be able to say, yeah, I've got that ready cash. And I can prove it to you. Because guess what? I can't wait till Monday as the seller to say, well, I got Suzanne ready to go. All right. So what happens? Termination of the marketing period. Once the seller received notice from the buyer, I'm saying Cynthia, who has entered into the contract for the sale of the property, the marketing period ends. So at that point, when Cynthia says, I can perform, guess what happens? It just goes to pending. It's over. No more other offers over there. Suzanne may have lost out on the deal, or maybe I'll tell Suzanne, why don't you write me a backup offer in case something happens? Never know. The purchase agreement shall remain contingent upon the closing and the funding of the buyer's property. So there's that little period of time in there that you've got to make sure that it closes, because she says, yeah, it's under contract. We're going to close on this date. Okay. We are now making this agreement a real live one here. Suzanne's out of the picture. Now it's Cynthia and I. She said, we got a contract on this deal. Boom. I'm willing to do it. I said, okay, I will say we're going to put this property as pending at this point. But let's say all of a sudden, Cynthia goes down the road. We have full intention we're closing the deal. And all of a sudden, the people bail out during the inspection place for the house that she was going to sell in San Diego. What happens? Well, if it falls apart, the buyer has to notify the seller that, guess what? I can't do the deal. Now, at that point, the seller can say, you know what? Love you, kid, but I'm giving you notice. And in my own sole discretion, I'm going to terminate your purchase agreement. Love you, but it's not going to work out. I can't wait around. And by the way, I've got somebody in the wings that I don't have to go through this again. So I go on over to Suzanne, give her a call, says, guess what? It ain't going to work out. Are you still willing to do it? I may even wait and not even notify my contingent. I may not even notify Cynthia because I got 2 days to get back to her. And Suzanne said, guess what, Tom? I already found something else. Sorry, we missed out. So I have that option at that point to say, okay, we're going to go back at this deal. I am going to say, put that sucker back as active, and you can go around the circle one more time until you can find a buyer. When you find the buyer, the process starts all over again. Okay. So it's a little tricky, but you can see here, Seller may resume marketing the subject property in such time the buyer notify the buyer that he's entered into another contract. I've been in these in the past, and they're gnarly. I'll be very honest. But if you have the right people in the right place and the right broker who will work with you on this deal, it's great. The deal I got involved with had sold these people a wonderful house over here on the south side of Santa Fe. Their son was moving back. They wanted a bigger house. So I landed up saying, okay, working with both brokers. So I'm working with the guy who's selling the big house. And I said, okay, Jacob, our own Jacob Martinez, these people are good for it, but they got to sell their other house. Cool. Their house finally goes under contract with the labor group. And I'm talking to Jerome and saying, Jerome, okay, these people have, once they sell, this house closes, they're going to buy another house. We also need to do an occupancy agreement because they need to stay in your house even after the closing because the other house doesn't close for 2 days after. Believe me, those are the kind of deals that you got to stay on top of. Those are the kind of things that you got to have those calendars. Those are the level of communication that you have to have with the brokers involved of what's going on. And if everybody's on the same sheet of music and you maintain that communication, and I was dictating the calendar of deadlines to everybody so they saw them, we got there. But I lost a little hair on that scenario, to tell you the truth. Last point here, time for satisfaction of the waiver contingency. It's just not an open book. Without any notice or demand, buyer shall notify seller in writing on or before the 1st. That's the contingency date, okay, to the seller. If you can't put your deal together by the 1st of June, Cynthia, we're done, okay? Not only that, if you can't get it done, I may be asking you for the earnest money. So here you go. Couple things you got to look at. And what makes it a good contingency or not. In this case, the buyer's property is for sale. They already got it. And it's listed with John Williams of the San Diego real estate brokerage. And the buyer is currently listed on their MLS with a number. And that market, it's been on the market since the 25th. All right. What do you do to verify that? A couple things. You call John Williams, say, John, I understand you have the listing. How's it coming along? Other thing you can do, frankly, is, Zillow does have its purposes. You can go right to that location, to John Williams, San Diego, and probably find the property. There's ways of doing that. It gets a little dicier if you go to this one, if they didn't check A and they go to B. The buyer's property is not yet for sale. The buyer will or will not list the property with a licensed real estate firm within blank dates. Well, I'm going to feel a little better if it says he will do it versus him saying, well, I'm thinking about doing it. Okay. And this, okay, you move a little further. Buyer will deliver proof of this listing to the seller, to me, within blank dates of acceptance. Okay, so you're going to give me 2 days. But if the buyer fails to deliver proof of said listing, the purchase agreement and the earnest money will not be refunded to the buyer. This is where put some skin in the game. I need deadlines. I need to know it's on the MLS. And if it's not, you're going to be giving me your earnest money. Okay. Any notices made to the buyers under the contingency shall be done, in my case, the seller's broker, and same thing goes on the other side to the buyer's broker. Waiver. This is where we were talking about, Cynthia's uncle getting real rich and giving her the money. Okay. If the buyer elects to waive the contingency for the sale of the property, okay, he has until at least that June 1st date. If she doesn't waive it and does not inform people that she cannot perform, the earnest money will not be refunded back to the buyer. Again, they got skin in the game. So if you're one of these people putting the purchase agreement together with one of these contingencies, you better be watching the days, because if you're not getting those waivers, then I'll guarantee you when you tell your buyer, oh, we missed the time to do it, and the seller is saying, I'm keeping the earnest money, not going to be real happy with you. Okay. Seller's right to approve. Again, buyer shall provide to the seller at the time of the waiver evidence is satisfactory to the seller that the buyer is financially qualified to purchase the subject property. So right now, you'll see in the purchase agreement that it will tell you, it gives you some choices. The new purchase agreement, it'll say, it's a cash offer, it's going to be a conventional loan. And then they put a little box on the bottom that says other. That is a point right in that other. If you're making that purchase agreement, it's contingent on the sale of my property, which is estimated to sell for XYZ. That's what that little other can play into. If the seller fails to provide notice of disapproval within the time specified, seller is deemed to have approved the buyer's financial qualification. So the seller's also on the hook. If he doesn't look at that and say, yeah, I accept your financial situation, and he just blows it off, well, guess what? He's on the hook because you did not notify the buyer that you were not happy with their financial situation. So we keep going. Here's a fun one. We've all talked about Tom before. Remember Tom, not this Tom. Okay. What does it mean? Time off the market. That is money you don't even touch. It is money you don't even have in earnest money. That is a check written directly to the seller for taking the property off the market. We don't do a lot of it here in Santa Fe. Albuquerque, you see quite a bit. But hypothetically, versus the fact of tying up earnest money because you really want to do your due diligence, you might want to consider writing them a check for $500, $1,000 for 2 days. I'm going to get my inspector over there. But keep in mind that if your inspector says, oh man, this is a dump, you're not going to get that $500 to $1,000 back. It is already written to them. All right. Same thing with earnest money shall be deposited. Okay. As specified in the purchase agreement. In my mind, if I'm going to do one of these contingencies, even if I'm the guy writing it, I'm kind of pushing my buyers to say, you got to have skin in the game, man. You might as well do that because I want you to perform. Same thing, time periods in the purchase agreement. For performances of all obligations shall begin at a specified purchase, the agreement of the date, or written notice. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about when we were doing hard dates versus future dates, 3 days from acceptance. That's when the clock starts. Right? If there's any conflict between the provision of the purchase agreement and this addendum, the provision of the addendum will control. Remaining provision of the purchase agreement will remain in effect. So there you go. That's why you don't want to do those dates, except as I was stating to you guys. So that's pretty much all of it in a nutshell. They give you additional forms here. Buyer hereby notifies the buyer has received an acceptable offer. Here's that first one. You fill it out, boom, you send it back to the seller's broker. Same thing here. Buyer hereby notifies that he checked that he waives or he satisfies this contingency. All I can tell you guys, if you get into one of these, first time, come see me because they're a little tricky. We just want to make sure your purchase agreement matches up with your buyer's contingency agreement. Okay. They're not, like I said, right now, we're not seeing a lot of it because, the market is so hot. But as time goes on, just like everything else, it's that roller coaster ride. They'll come back in fashion. They always do. And when I was doing brokerage with you guys, all the time, I hated these things, but I also found them as a strong tool particularly when I was up at Quail Run, we'd find people who wanted to retire to that condominium complex. And these were people who were selling houses, for $1 million plus. Yeah, it was pretty good, particularly if I was able to convince them to let me have the listing. I could dance. We're going to sell it. So it's just, another tool. And each time that we go through the process here, you learn another tool, and at least you're familiar with it. So this will be recorded. Oh, I was going to show you something cool, guys. See if I can get on it. Hang on a second. Bear with me. Yo. Here it comes. All right, I'm going to share something with you guys. You guys all remember the Tom Trujillo Real Estate website. There I am, leaning on my sign. If you go all the way here, I'll be changing things, and there'll be Tom's QB Corner. And if you click on that, hopefully, there you guys are learning the technology. And here are all the classes that we've been going through. Okay. And if you want a calendar of the month of April through June, click on that and you can download it. And you'll see all the classes that we'll be teaching. I also have put a few of those that Ashley has been teaching in there as well. So as time goes on, we'll increase it, and I'll clean up. For example, when they really do get us a new listing agreement, wherever it is, there it is. I'll probably be changing that one out, and we'll just do a summary update on the new ones. So it's pretty simple. You can just go to tomtrujillorealestate.com, click on the QB Corner, and these things will come up. So at 2:00 in the morning, when you're having that panic, and all of a sudden you're going, "Oh my God, what did Tom say?" You won't have a problem with it. Let's see, we got a couple of questions. Okay, Anna B. Okay. All right. Anybody else got anything going on? Yeah.
I have a question. But I sent you an email earlier, so it may pass in this question.
Okay.
But it's regarding the new contract. I do see your website. It's awesome with the recordings. I appreciate that. But could you also email me the annotated new contract?
Yes, I apologize that I might have missed it, Cynthia. I'll do that. Yeah, all these that I show you guys that we record and so forth, I keep them as annotated just so you have them. Don't copy them exactly, because you probably selling to somebody else besides Bill Smith. But that's what they're there for. So yeah, I'll do that right after this class.
Thank you, Tom.
You got it. All right. Any other questions? You're going to go out and do yourself a buyer contingency, right? Yeah, it's okay. The time will come, and I'm here for you guys when you get to that point. And but sometimes it might be there, and you're going to find that I suspect that right now it's a little tough, and there's a lot of these deals that people are saying, "Man, I really need to sell my house in Dallas before I can move to Santa Fe." In a normal market, that probably would be okay. But right now, if you're the listing broker, you're just saying, "Love you, go sell it. And when you sell it, come back and see me, because the market's just too hot right now at this point." Okay. Okie dokie. Well, there you go. We did a quick one today. How about that? 41 minutes. Woohoo! Okay. Well, I'm going to get ready for my other little Zoom meeting, and maybe I'll see you guys at 3:00. Okay. You guys have a good one.